What if the person you dismissed as invisible turned out to hold the key to everything you thought mattered? On a crisp autumn evening in Manhattan, 42-year-old Victoria Ashworth stood in her penthouse, surrounded by crystal glasses and designer gowns, believing her world was perfect. The charity gala she'd organized was in full swing, with society's elite mingling beneath chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. But across the room, quietly wiping down tables with worn hands, stood someone whose story would shatter everything Victoria thought she knew about worth and value. Elena Martinez had been cleaning these same floors for 3 years, invisible to the wealthy guests who stepped around her as if she were furniture. Tonight, however, would be different. One moment of cruelty would set in motion a chain of events that would transform both women's lives forever. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Where are you watching from tonight? Victoria Ashworth had built her reputation on perfection. Every detail of tonight's charity gala had been meticulously planned, from the imported orchids to the hand-selected champagne. As the wife of prominent investment banker James Ashworth, she'd learned that image was everything in their social circle. The penthouse buzzed with conversation as Manhattan's most influential families gathered to support her latest cause, funding arts programs for underprivileged youth, though Victoria saw it more as an opportunity to showcase her organizational skills than genuine charity. Elena Martinez moved through the crowd like a shadow, her cleaning cart barely noticed as she maintained the spotless environment Victoria demanded. At 38, Elena had worked multiple cleaning jobs to support her teenage daughter, Carmen, who was studying pre-med at community college. Elena took pride in her work, even when it meant being treated as invisible. She'd learned to find dignity in providing for her family, no matter how others saw her. The evening progressed smoothly until Elena accidentally brushed against a display table while reaching for a fallen napkin. The antique vase wobbled but didn't fall, yet Victoria's sharp eyes caught the movement from across the room. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her wine glass as she watched Elena steady the priceless piece with gentle hands. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice cut through the elegant chatter as she approached Elena. The conversations around them gradually quieted as guests sensed tension brewing. "Did you just touch my grandmother's Ming Dynasty vase with those filthy hands?" Elena looked up, her dark eyes meeting Victoria's cold stare. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just cleaning up this napkin and accidentally." "Don't touch anything else," Victoria interrupted, her voice rising enough for nearby guests to hear clearly. "Your dirty hands ruin everything they touch. Do you have any idea what that vase is worth? More than you'll make in a lifetime of scrubbing floors." The room fell silent except for the soft jazz playing in the background. Elena's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as dozens of eyes turned toward them. She'd experienced dismissive treatment before, but never such public humiliation. Her hands, rough from years of honest work, trembled slightly as she stepped back from the table. "I understand," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll be more careful." Victoria wasn't finished. "Careful? You shouldn't be touching anything valuable at all. Stay in the kitchen where you belong. I don't want to see you near my guests again tonight." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others pretended to look away. Elena's supervisor, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway, quickly approached to escort her away. As Elena walked toward the kitchen, her head held high despite her humiliation, she passed a distinguished older gentleman who watched the entire exchange with growing disgust. Dr. Robert Chen, a retired surgeon and longtime family friend of Victoria's late grandmother, had witnessed something that reminded him of conversations he'd had with the elder Mrs. Ashworth years ago. His weathered face tightened as he recognized the irony of the situation. Victoria had no idea who Elena really was, or how this moment would come back to change everything she thought she knew about her family's legacy. Dr. Chen couldn't shake what he'd witnessed. As Victoria returned to her guests with a satisfied smile, accepting compliments on her firm management style, he found himself thinking about conversations from long ago. Victoria's grandmother, Eleanor Ashworth, had been a woman of remarkable compassion who believed that true worth came from character, not bank accounts. She would have been horrified by her granddaughter's behavior tonight. Meanwhile, Elena finished her shift in silence, her co-workers offering sympathetic glances but keeping their distance. The humiliation burned deeper than any physical pain she'd ever endured. As she gathered her supplies, she thought about Carmen, who was working late at the library, studying for her anatomy exam. Everything Elena did was for her daughter's future, to ensure Carmen would never have to clean up after people who saw her as less than human. The next morning brought unexpected news. Victoria received a call from her family's longtime attorney, requesting an urgent meeting about her grandmother's estate. Apparently, there were some recently discovered documents that required her immediate attention. Victoria assumed it was about additional assets, perhaps another property or investment account she'd inherited. At the law office, Mr. Harrison spread several documents across the mahogany table. Victoria, your grandmother left very specific instructions about her charitable foundation. She established a trust 20 years ago to provide scholarships for hard-working students whose parents work in service industries. Victoria nodded impatiently. Yes, I'm aware of grandmother's various charities. What does this have to do with me? The trust has been accumulating value for 2 decades. It's now worth over $2 million. Your grandmother specified that you would oversee its distribution, but only after you learned about the recipients personally. Mr. Harrison handed her a thick folder. These are the scholarship recipients from the past 5 years. Victoria opened the folder dismissively, expecting to scan through quickly. Her hands froze when she saw the first page. There, in clear black and white, was a photograph of Elena Martinez and her daughter Carmen. The documentation showed that Carmen had received a full scholarship for her pre-medical studies, funded entirely by Eleanor Ashworth's foundation. Elena had been working multiple jobs to cover living expenses while Carmen focused on her education. "This can't be right," Victoria whispered, her face paling. "The cleaning woman from last night. Elena Martinez has been a scholarship recipient's guardian for 3 years. Your grandmother specifically chose families where the parents worked in service industries, believing they understood the true value of hard work and education." Mr. Harrison's voice carried a hint of disappointment. "Eleanor wanted you to understand the dignity of honest work before taking control of the foundation." Victoria's stomach lurched as she remembered her cruel words from the previous evening. As Victoria sat staring at Elena's photograph, she realized that her grandmother had orchestrated this lesson from beyond the grave. The question now was whether Victoria would have the courage to face Elena again, knowing that her words had wounded someone her grandmother had specifically chosen to honor. Victoria spent the rest of the day reading through the scholarship files, each story hitting her like a physical blow. Elena's application included a heartfelt essay about sacrifice, dignity, and dreams. She wrote about working 3 cleaning jobs while Carmen studied, never complaining because she knew education was the path to a better life. The essay revealed that Elena had once been a teacher in Mexico before immigrating to provide opportunities for her daughter. That evening, Victoria couldn't eat dinner. James noticed her distraction as she pushed food around her plate, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something he'd never seen before, genuine shame. When he asked about the charity gala, she couldn't bring herself to tell him about the encounter with Elena. Instead, she made an excuse and retreated to her study. She found herself Googling Elena's name, discovering that Carmen had made the dean's list every semester and volunteered at free medical clinics. Social media showed pictures of a young woman who radiated joy and determination, often photographed studying late into the night while her mother worked nearby, both supporting each other's dreams. The next morning, Victoria drove to the hospital where Elena worked her second job, cleaning the early morning shift. She sat in her Mercedes in the parking lot for nearly an hour, watching Elena arrive in her worn coat, carrying a thermos of coffee and walking with the quiet dignity of someone who'd never let circumstances break her spirit. Victoria finally worked up the courage to approach Elena in the hospital cafeteria during her break. Elena looked up from her simple sandwich, surprise and wariness crossing her face when she recognized the woman who had humiliated her 2 nights before. "Mrs. Martinez," Victoria began, her voice shaking in a way it never had before. "I need to speak with you. I know this is unexpected, but—" Elena set down her sandwich carefully. "If this is about what happened at your party, I already spoke to my supervisor. I was more careful the rest of the evening." "No," Victoria said quickly, sliding uninvited into the opposite chair. It's about your daughter Carmen, and my grandmother's scholarship foundation. Elena's expression shifted from wariness to confusion. I discovered yesterday that Carmen has been receiving funding from my family's trust. A trust I'm supposed to oversee. Elena's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're Eleanor Ashworth's granddaughter. You knew my grandmother? She interviewed me personally 3 years ago when Carmen was accepted for the scholarship. She came to our apartment, sat at our kitchen table, and asked about our dreams. Elena's voice carried a mixture of fondness and sadness. She said she wanted to meet the families personally, to understand their stories. She was nothing like. Elena stopped herself, but Victoria understood. Nothing like me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Victoria realized that her grandmother had known exactly what she was doing, creating a situation where Victoria would eventually confront her own prejudices face to face. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Victoria looked at Elena's hands, the same hands she'd called dirty, and saw years of sacrifice, love, and dedication. She was about to learn that sometimes the most important lessons come from admitting you were completely wrong. I owe you an apology that words can't express, Victoria said, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. What I said to you at the gala was unforgivable. I was cruel and wrong, and I'm ashamed of who I was that night. Elena studied Victoria's face, seeing genuine remorse where once there had been cold disdain. Your grandmother would not have approved of how you treated me. She would have been horrified, Victoria admitted. But I think she knew this might happen. She set up this foundation knowing I'd eventually have to face the recipients personally. She was trying to teach me something I should have learned years ago. Elena's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Eleanor was wise. She told me that privilege without compassion is worthless. She said her granddaughter needed time to understand that. Victoria pulled out the scholarship folder, showing Elena her own file. I spent all night reading about your family. About Carmen's achievements, about your sacrifices. I learned that you were a teacher in Mexico, that you gave up everything to give your daughter opportunities. Carmen is everything to me, Elena said simply. Every floor I clean, every hour I work, it's for her future. Your grandmother understood that. I want to make this right, Victoria said urgently. Not just an apology. I want to truly understand what my grandmother was trying to teach me. Would you consider letting me meet Carmen? Let me see the student my family's foundation is supporting. Elena hesitated. Carmen doesn't know what happened at your party. I didn't want her to feel ashamed of my work. You should never feel ashamed, Victoria said firmly. Your work has more dignity than anything I've ever done. You're building your daughter's future with your own hands. That afternoon, Elena agreed to let Victoria visit their small but spotless apartment. When Carmen arrived home from classes, she was surprised to find the well-dressed woman sitting at their kitchen table, the same table where her mother had once hosted Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth. Carmen's intelligence and warmth immediately impressed Victoria. The young woman spoke passionately about her studies, her dream of becoming a pediatric surgeon, and her gratitude for the scholarship that made it possible. She showed Victoria her awards, her research projects, and most touchingly, a framed photo of her mother receiving an Employee Recognition Award for dedication and excellence. Mom works harder than anyone I know, Carmen said proudly. She taught me that honest work is never shameful, no matter what others might think. Victoria felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. She understood now why her grandmother had chosen this family. Elena and Carmen embodied everything Eleanor had valued: hard work, dignity, love, and dreams bigger than circumstances. As the visit continued, Victoria realized this wasn't just about making amends for her cruel words. This was about understanding who she wanted to become versus who she had been. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. The foundation her grandmother left wasn't just about money, it was about building bridges between different worlds, creating understanding where there had been division. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the same penthouse where she'd once humiliated Elena, but everything had changed. This time, the gathering wasn't about displaying wealth, it was a celebration for Carmen and 5 other scholarship recipients who had achieved academic honors. Elena moved through the room not as hired help, but as an honored guest, wearing a dress Victoria had insisted on buying for her. Carmen had just received early acceptance to medical school with a full scholarship, partly funded by additional donations Victoria had secured from her social network. But more importantly, Elena had accepted Victoria's offer to coordinate the scholarship foundation, using her teaching background to mentor other families navigating higher education. "I still can't believe how much has changed," Elena said, standing beside Victoria as they watched Carmen confidently discussing her research with other guests. "My grandmother would say nothing changed except my ability to see what was always there," Victoria replied. "The dignity, the love, the strength. You had all of that before I met you. I just finally learned to recognize it." Dr. Chen approached them, smiling warmly. "Eleanor would be proud of both of you. She always said the best gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages." Victoria had discovered that Elena's wisdom extended far beyond her cleaning work. As the foundation's new coordinator, Elena had identified dozens of deserving families, creating a network of support that transformed entire communities. Victoria found herself learning more from Elena's insights than from any business meeting she'd ever attended. "There's something I want to show you," Victoria said, leading Elena to a new addition in her study. Hanging prominently on the wall was a framed photo of Eleanor Ashworth alongside a quote she'd written: "True wealth is measured not by what we possess, but by what we give and who we lift up along the way." She left specific instructions that I should only display this once I understood its meaning, Victoria explained. "I think she knew exactly how long it would take me to get here." Elena smiled, touching the frame gently. She was very patient with people's journeys. She said everyone deserves the chance to become their best self. As the evening wound down, Victoria watched Carmen help her mother gather the coats, both women moving with the same grace and dignity that had always been there, waiting for someone to notice. The foundation had grown beyond Victoria's grandmother's original vision, creating mentorship programs, family support networks, and opportunities for entire communities. Standing in her penthouse that night, Victoria realized that the most valuable thing her grandmother had left her wasn't money or property. It was the chance to discover that worth isn't measured in bank accounts or social status, but in the love we show each other and the dreams we help each other achieve. Elena and Carmen had given Victoria something she'd never known she was missing: the understanding that every person carries stories of struggle, sacrifice, and hope that deserve to be honored, not dismissed. The cleaning lady she'd once insulted with cruel words had become the teacher who showed her what it truly meant to live with dignity and purpose. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of understanding that sometimes our greatest teachers come in the most unexpected forms.